And okay, perfect. Uh, like to thank everybody for attending the 2022 March Eureka Texas Speaker Series. We've got a great presentation today. My name is Brian King. I'm the moderator. Um, and the success of the 2020 Census and Plans for Future Geographic Operations is the title of today's presentation. We're very fortunate to have Deirdre Dalpiez Bishop. She's the chief of the Geography Division at the U.S. Census Bureau, and she's agreed to present to us today. So it should be fantastic. And Deirdre, we really appreciate you taking the time today, and just really looking forward to the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you at this moment.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian, and greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you today. It's an honor to be part of Eurissa's Texas Speaker Series, and I'm pleased to be able to share the success of the 2020 census and our vision for the future of the Geographic Support Program. I just wanted to come on camera to say hello, get to know you this way for a moment, and now I'm going to turn my camera off to help save bandwidth and ensure everything goes smoothly for the rest of the presentation. All right. Well, let's get started. The 2020 census, as I'm sure you can imagine, was one of the most challenging in our nation's history. Just as we started to invite people to respond to the 2020 census in March of 2020, the entire country began to shut down because of the coronavirus. And we very quickly had to adjust our plans, readjust our plans as the months went on. And I'll share a little bit about that today. I'm happy to report, though, that we succeeded in our efforts. We released the apportionment data to the president and the redistricting data to the states, and all of the information has been posted online for the American public. Before I share the results, though, I'd like to present a little bit about how we incorporated geospatial information and systems into our design. I heard Christina say we love maps on this call, and I'm so thrilled to hear it. I'm going to share a number of our maps with you through the presentation. I think it's really important to share what worked well during the 2020 census with the idea that we're going to move many of these accomplishments forward into the work for this new decade. As you can see here, geography provides the foundation for all data collection, processing, tabulation, and dissemination activities at the Census Bureau. For that reason, our first step in preparing for the 2020 census was building a national address list and geospatial database that established where to count all of the people. We began early last decade, in 2013, to ensure a complete geographic foundation that could be used to conduct our enumeration activities. First, we worked with our partners in tribal, federal, state, and local government to enhance the information that we had collected during the 2010 census. We employed a multi-layered process of address ingest, validation, and update using data from authoritative sources. Our primary source of updates came from the United States Postal Service. Twice per year, they shared the address list that they used to deliver mail, the delivery sequence file. Using their delivery sequence file, we added 5.9 million new addresses to our master address file. Additionally, we were able to confirm that 2.4 million addresses that were new to the delivery sequence file throughout the decade already existed in our master address file, most likely through contributions by other authoritative sources. As part of our ongoing geographic partnership programs, tribal, state, and local governments shared nearly 107 million addresses with us. When we matched those to the master address file, 99.5% matched. This served as an important validation of the addresses in our address list. Additionally, these same partners contributed over 521,000 new addresses and 257,000 miles of roads. In 2018, the Census Bureau implemented the Local Update of Census Addresses program, or LUCA, to provide tribal, state, and local governments an opportunity to review and update the Census Bureau's address list for their respective jurisdictions. Participants from over 8,300 entities provided 22 million addresses, of which 81% matched to addresses already in the master address file. The Census Bureau added 3.4 million new addresses nationwide as a result of the LUCA program. To allow tribal, state, and local governments one final opportunity to submit addresses where construction was completed between March of 2018 and April 1st of 2020, or Census Day, the Census Bureau conducted the new construction program. Approximately 595,000 new addresses were added by just over 2,200 participants. This data helps demonstrate how a multi-layered process provided multiple opportunities for the Census Bureau to obtain addresses from various sources, validating, updating, and filling in temporal and spatial data gaps along the way. Working with our partners early in the decade set us up for the next address list development activity, the address canvassing operation. The design of this 2020 census operation was much different than in the past. In 2009, as we prepared for the 2010 census, the Census Bureau hired approximately 150,000 address listers to validate 100% of the nation's addresses during a field operation, walking around block by block. In preparation for the 2020 census, we knew we could do much of this validation in the office, using satellite imagery in combination with housing unit counts from our master address file. To make this happen, we developed an operation called in-office address canvassing. Using about 150 technicians, we conducted a complete review of all 11.1 million blocks in the nation. The technicians validated 87% of the blocks as passive, meaning there was no difference between the number of housing units that they observed in satellite imagery as compared with the number of housing units that we stored in the master address file. The 87% of the blocks that were validated during in-office address canvassing represented 65% of the nation's addresses. The dark blue areas on this map represent counties that had over 70% of their blocks classified as passive or stable. The remaining 35% were sent for validation in the field, in an operation appropriately called in-field address canvassing. This occurred during the summer of 2019. We hired 32,000 address listers to do this work in comparison to the 150,000 listers from the past. 88.2% of the addresses, or 44.1 million, were validated by our field workers as correct. The remainder were changed or deleted. Address listers added 2.7 million new addresses, but when we matched those against the master address file, nearly 58% of those new addresses matched, meaning they really weren't new addresses after all and had likely been added through concurrent in-office methods. The dark green areas on this map represent counties that had over 50% of their blocks classified as active or changing, and therefore requiring in-field verification. This new suite of address canvassing activities, in-office and in-field, avoided millions in costs as compared with the 2010 census address canvassing operation. Upon finalization of these address list development activities, we delivered a universe of 152 million addresses that would be included in the 2020 census enumeration universe. 95% of those received an invitation in the mail, the area shown in blue on this map. 5% were hand-delivered an invitation, or the interview was completed at the door. The area is shown in green and yellow. We employed the use of online, interactive map viewers, like this one, to share this type of information with the public. As the invitations were making their way to the households, we were using tools like this, the Response Outreach Area Mapper, to identify areas that were least likely to respond. Those areas are shown here at the census tract level of geography in the darkest shade of blue. We use data from our American Community Survey to help identify the types of populations living in these areas. And we then use that information to tailor our outreach strategy, both our message and the selection of trusted messengers to motivate people to respond. By early August, we were able to begin knocking on the doors of the addresses that did not self-respond to the 2020 census. We used a map viewer to publicly share our progress at the area census office level of geography. There were 248 area census offices distributed across the country. The map is all green now because by October 15th of 2020, we had successfully enumerated 99.9% of the nation's addresses. Over the next few months, we processed and tabulated all of that data, resulting in the publication of the apportionment results on April 26th of 2021. The total 2020 census apportionment population for the 50 states was 331,108,434, which is a 7.1% increase from the 2010 census apportionment population total. Remember, this does not include the District of Columbia because they do not have voting representation in Congress. The average apportionment population per representative in Congress is now 761,169, which is an increase of just over 50,000 people from the 2010 average. This next slide shows a map that displays the apportionment of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives based on the 2020 census and the change in seats from 2010. The number of seats in the House is shown on each state. So way to go, Texas, 38 representatives. For the change in seats, the green states gained seats and the purple states lost seats. So lucky for the state of Texas, you can see you gained 2 seats. The majority of states did not see a change in the number of seats. This next slide depicts the 2020 census demographic data map viewer. It's a web-based application available online now that includes state, county, and census tract level data from the 2020 census. The map includes data related to population, race, Hispanic origin, housing, and group quarters. The map automatically switches from state data to county data and tract data as you zoom in to the more detailed scales. Now that the 2020 census is complete, I bet you're wondering, where do we go next? What are we thinking for the future? Our program vision enables continuous updates that build upon our accomplishments of the past few decades. The vision focuses on people, process, and technology. For the 2010 census, I mentioned that we hired a workforce of about 150,000 people to walk around every block in the nation and canvass the addresses using a handheld device to capture GPS points. For the 2020 census, we re-engineered our operations to conduct most of that work in the office, validating 65% of the nation's addresses with people sitting at their desks. As we look to the work of this decade and the 2030 census, we plan to optimize our workforce of professional geographers to focus on strategic initiatives to continuously update our master address file in our geospatial database. How are we going to make that happen? Through the use of our geographic support program. Our program for the future includes 8 primary components shown here: addresses, features, boundaries, geospatial reference data, such as satellite and aerial imagery, frames, partnerships, expertise and leadership, and of course, the master address file, TIGER system. For those of you familiar with TIGER, you know that acronym stands for the Topologically Integrated Geographic Encoding and Referencing System, and it's such a mouthful, you see why we call it TIGER. Through these 8 components, we're going to maintain and strengthen the infrastructure that's necessary for the Census Bureau's data collection, processing, tabulation, and dissemination programs for the United States. We will be able to regularly share accurate and up-to-date geospatial data, products, and expertise with you, our partners in tribal, federal, state, and local government. Coming off of the 2020 census, the information in the MAF TIGER system is in very good shape, and we want to keep it that way. We've outlined our plans to do so in a vision document for the years 2021 through 2031, and we received approval from the Census Bureau's operating committee to move that vision forward. The vision includes continuous updates of addresses, features, and boundaries throughout the entire decade. We're going to continue our best practices from the 2020 census. For example, receiving address updates from the United States Postal Service. Also, designing interactive map viewers that communicate operational and statistical data with our users. We plan to capitalize on our use of automated methods and technology. For instance, the use of satellite imagery to help detect change on the ground. We intend to perform continuous assessment of our data and our products. We want the ability to analyze the information about addresses, features, and boundaries in near real time and take action immediately. We plan to utilize data science methods to measure quality and coverage, plan and coordinate our update processes, and evaluate our effectiveness. Using the assessments to improve information in the MAF TIGER system, we'll expand discovery and use of our data by partners both inside and outside of the Census Bureau. To ensure that we're meeting the needs of our external stakeholders in this vision, such as yourselves, we conducted a series of 5 listening tours with groups of about 10 to 12 people in each meeting. These meetings, of course, had to be conducted virtually due to the pandemic, but we were very pleased with the results. We're planning to publicly release those results soon, and if you'd like to weigh in on our vision for the next decade, please let me know, and we can schedule a special session for Texas or for your colleagues. New to this decade, we intend to enhance our master address file to be a compendium of all addresses, residential, non-residential, and mixed use, to support all areas of the Census Bureau. Instead of concentrating only on residential housing, as we did in preparation for the 2020 census, we're planning to enhance our focus to include non-residential addresses, group quarters, think colleges and nursing homes, for example, military housing, and transient locations like campgrounds and marinas. We will also maintain a list of addresses in the island areas. These areas have traditionally been updated only at the end of the decade, but now we're going to move to continuous updating instead. All of these changes will help the Census Bureau's Geography division pivot from primarily supporting the decennial census to supporting the entire Census Bureau enterprise. Our agency is working to transform. Our customers are expecting relevant information faster than ever and in easy-to-use formats. There's an effort across the Census Bureau to thrive in the new statistical universe and stay on the leading edge of statistical practices, capabilities, and technologies. We're working to engage employees at all levels to generate ideas and take risks on what should change. And we're striving to give employees the tools, skills, and training they need to stay competitive. One of the most exciting ways we intend to transform is by linking the Census Bureau's foundational data sets to maximize integration and enterprise-wide use of our rich data sources, including the geospatial frame, the business frame, the job frame, and the demographic frame. What does that look like? The Geographic Support Program will ensure that geography, addresses, address points, features, and boundaries, all of the information that you see here on the left, is the organizing principle that ties location to the rest of the Census Bureau's data about businesses, jobs, and people, the information that you see here on the right. We will use unique identification keys to link one frame of information to the other. This in turn will result in modernization of our operations. When we match information like addresses from one frame to another, that process will help to strengthen both frames, as well as reduce duplication of efforts across the organization. It will reduce respondent burden by using information we have in-house, rather than asking more questions of the public during our current surveys. This plan will help foster new and enhanced data products and services about topics such as commuting, migration, income, and commodity flows. Similar to the listening tours that we conducted in support of our geographic operations and data, we also conducted a series of listening tours to help develop use cases based on what our external stakeholders would like to see the most from the Enterprise Frames program. I'm really excited about this vision for our future because leaders and groups across the Census Bureau are now recognizing the power of geographic information and what is possible when we use geospatial intelligence to link information and create new products from our trusted sources of information: the decennial census, the American Community Survey, the economic census, the longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics Program, or LEHD, and other intercensus surveys and programs, I'm really excited about this, like I mentioned, and I'll do my very best to keep you updated about our progress along the way. Just think about all the possibilities. Thanks so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
All right, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. We'll go ahead and take Q&A right now. For those of you, just post it into the chat window. That would be fantastic. We'll read them off for Deirdre to respond to. The way we do that is if people are going to be driving and they've called in, well, they'll be able to understand the question. So Addie and Matt, let's go through some of the questions here. And Christina, sorry. Let's see here.
Sure, Brian. It looks like there's one from LG, and they are asking, how do you account for homeless populations?
That's a great question because it's hard to build an address list throughout the decade to account for the homeless because they're transient and moving around a lot. But we do have 6 regional offices across the country, and they're continually working with the members of local government to identify where the homeless are currently staying. As we approach each decennial census, we build a list of those places, and then we conduct a targeted enumeration over a few days to go out and send our Census Bureau employees on the streets and conduct the interviews with the homeless people. It's a challenge, but it's proven successful, that model, through the past. Even during the pandemic, while it was more of a challenge, we did have strong relationships with the places that were providing services, such as the soup kitchens, the group homes, and we're able to target people that way as well.
Nice. We do have one here from Kevin, and Kevin has a question. Are there plans to release the address point layer to the public?
That's a good question too, Kevin. Thank you. Right now, both our address list, so the master address file, a record of each housing unit, and the associated address points, the points of latitude and longitude that we maintain in our Tiger database, are protected by Title 13 of the United States Code. While we sit on this national resource, we're not allowed to share that information publicly. We're only allowed to share our geospatial information, such as our boundary files and our road layer. With that said, we are currently working with the Department of Transportation and the Federal Geographic Data Community to build a national address database. And if you haven't heard about that, I encourage you to just Google National Address Database, Department of Transportation, and it'll take you right to the site. As of now, I believe there are over 60 million addresses across the nation that have been contributed. And so that may be a way, as we look to the future, to continuously share in a more open fashion than we're able to at the Census Bureau.
Okay. Matt, you want to take the next one?
Sure. Grant is asking, what GIS data sets are available directly from the Census Bureau, i.e. census tracts, census blocks, Tiger GIS data, etc.?
Mhm. Thank you, Grant. In the beginning of this year, actually the beginning of 2021, as we were finishing up the census, we released the new geographies associated with the 2020 census. All of the up-to-date boundaries for municipalities, towns, counties, states, as well as updated census tracts, block groups, and block boundaries were released at that time and are available on our website. There are over 14.1 million unique geographic areas that we're now sharing online with the public.
Okay. Well, we have Richard has a question here. Are you able to inform us how much homelessness has increased this past decade? And I'll throw something in there. If not, can you direct us to some information that you might know of?
I believe that we have not yet released the specific data. That information is coming out later this summer. However, I can do a little homework, and if there is something I can share, I will.
Okay.
Brian, can I give that to you, and then you'll disseminate to the group? What's the best way?
You can send that to me, or you, yeah, that's just fine.
Okay.
You could send it to the info at Eureka, Texas, and we'll include it with the presentation slides, just a link to your response.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
That works just as well.
Okay, and let me ask Richard a follow-up question. Are you interested specifically in the homeless population or in the population living across all types of group quarters, or both perhaps? And when I say group quarters, I mean both institutional and non-institutional facilities like colleges, nursing homes, prisons, etc.
Richard, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, can y'all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, so I guess I'd like to say both, really. It'd be great if you'd be able to answer that.
Okay, I can tell you right now, we do have table P5 that was released with the 2020 census redistricting data. And that table includes a breakdown of seven different types of institutional and non-institutional populations.
Okay.
I'll share that though when I communicate back with the coordinators.
Okay.
Appreciate that, ma'am.
My pleasure.
Matt?
All right, looks like our next question is from Eric. And the question is, does the census provide any block data on income and age?
The block data is available on the redistricting data website. That's population over 18 and under 18 at the block level. But to see more specific information, you would need to use the American Community Survey right now, which is available at the block group level. And then the more detailed data that will come out, I believe it's scheduled for later this summer, will include more detailed information from the 2020 census. So if you can wait a little bit, that will be available.
Okay. Well, Deirdre, I definitely told you there was going to be some questions. So we've got some more here.
Great.
Then we have Jesus, and he's asking a question from the Rio Grande Valley. Okay. His question is we were undercounted in the Rio Grande Valley. Is it possible to update numbers without affecting apportionment for representatives?
Mm. If you, Jesus, believe you were undercounted, I suggest you go online and look up information about the Count Question Resolution Program. This is an opportunity for you to challenge the 2020 census counts officially, and we'll review the information that you submit and make a decision. And if in fact we're able to adjust the count based on the information you've provided, then we'll release new numbers. Those will not affect apportionment, but you will have that number to work with in terms of, funding requests and updated figures for your community. Again, that's the Count Question Resolution Program, or CQR.
Question resolution. Thank you. It's an issue that's actually being discussed with our representatives. They met with your director last week, I believe.
Mhm.
They mentioned there might be a remedy as far as funding goes. That's what our main concern is.
Mhm.
As far as apportionment, the political scenes here, they're gonna. We had a big increase here in Texas. We got three more seats, and the redistricting in Austin favored, of course, the majority party. But so it wouldn't make a difference if we were apportioned or not, and we wouldn't get any
Mhm.
favorable representation.
It's definitely a good question, Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have another one from John. Okay, let's see here. Are there any plans to increase the availability of Tiger GIS files with demographics or other data products pre-attributed, including ACS and other non-decennial census products?
That's a great question, John, and we're hearing that from many of our stakeholders. We heard that request as we conducted our listening tours, and so we're looking right now to see how we could integrate both the statistical data and the geospatial data when we conduct our data releases. So stay tuned. We are thinking about it and recognize that that's of great interest.
Okay. The next question is from Alexander. And the question is, did you use any kind of AI approach to speed up 2020 census results?
The closest to AI that we used was the tool I showed earlier, where we had two different versions of satellite imagery, one from 2009, just prior to conducting the last census, and one version from current day. And we had our technicians scrolling back and forth between those two different vintages to see if change had occurred. And if the change was visible, then they would compare that to the count of housing units in the master address file and determine, did we need to send that block out for in-field verification? We would like to automate that process further. So instead of having 150 clerks sitting behind their computer, the computers are actually doing that change detection for us. And so that's what we're looking at as we look to this next decade. I'd be interested to know if you have other suggestions for incorporating AI into our work. If you'd be willing to share those either today or offline, that would be helpful for me.
Alexander, if you do have some information, just you can send it to info@ursatexas.org, and we can pass them along, and unless you want to type them in now.
I think the other thing that I can mention to Alexander's point is that I mentioned we're trying to link the 4 foundational data sets at the Census Bureau. We have the geospatial frame, which is a list of addresses. We have a list of business addresses in our business register with the associated company information. We have a list of jobs associated with people. And then from the 2020 census, we have a list of demographic information or person information. And so we're working to figure out how do we connect these 4 foundational data sets, and then how do we pull additional administrative data into, let's call it like a data lake, conduct matching, and create new products that will more quickly inform our stakeholders what's happening on the ground from a data perspective, and also reduce the amount of information we have to ask of the public when we conduct our surveys. Let's do as much as we can in-house to create less burden for our respondents.
Nice.
Mhm.
Well, we have Liz Parrish. She is a one of my URISA Texas colleagues. She has a question. I guess there were early concerns about the completeness of data and when this would be resolved. For example, some companies were concerned about adopting the new data early on. Can you speak to this and confirm when the data will be finalized?
The data is finalized now, and we feel confident that we conducted a complete count of the population in the United States, even though it was a challenge and a different model than we had expected as a result of the pandemic. We recently completed our post-enumeration survey, which is an independent survey that we conduct alongside of the census to measure the quality and accuracy of the census. And if you're interested in that type of data, I would encourage you to check it out. It's again the PES, the post-enumeration survey, and the results are available online.
Okay, we have Matt. Do you have another one here?
Yes, we do. Sorry, let me find myself in the
That's
box
fine.
here.
I think
Okay, great.
Jared's next. Yeah.
Yeah, Jared, yeah. And just to follow up, Alexander said that, sure, I will, in response to your request to share some information on the AI there. So the question from Jared is, how are your new differential privacy techniques calculated on block group data, and how accurate is it?
Jared, this is a question that's over my head. We have expert statisticians at the Census Bureau who developed the algorithms that we use to protect the information. And if you're interested, I can set up a call between you and those experts to help elaborate on how exactly that was done. That's just something that I haven't had time to devote myself to. Geography at the Census Bureau is a big job, managing all those different layers of information. And while I would have loved to have studied about the disclosure avoidance, I just haven't had time to do that yet. So we can follow up offline if you're interested.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the chat window there was just a little bit more conversation talking about Esri's doing some they're adding and updating tools for deep learning, and I think a conversation. Not sure if that relates back to the AI more likely. And then yes, our link to our YouTube channel is correct. We will have this recording up on YouTube here shortly. Are there any other questions for Deirdre? Yes, Ellen actually is a colleague of mine here at Friesen Nichols is asking a question. How does the Census Bureau approach or navigate relationships with private organizations like Esri or Google that hold geographic data of a similar nature?
That's a good question. We actually have an enterprise license agreement with Esri, where they're providing a lot of technical services to the Census Bureau. We also have a professional services contract with them, where we have about 3 Esri experts actually sitting at the Census Bureau, well, not in person now, but virtually, and they're providing support to our geographic operations and processes. There's a strong back and forth within that environment where we share ideas, processes, and try to enhance for the better. We do work with other companies that are collecting geospatial information to share best practices and see how we can work together to create the best possible geographic information for everyone. I will say that this happens a lot more frequently within the federal community across the various departments. So we're working very closely within the Department of Commerce with NOAA, our experts that do geospatial there, with the Department of Transportation, Department of Interior, Education, the Department of State, NASA. We all come together about once a month and talk about the latest and greatest in the geospatial world. And just one more thing to this point, there is a National Geospatial Advisory Committee, a committee of experts from both the private and public sectors, and including academia, who make recommendations to the federal leaders as to where we should be headed in the future. And we take their guidance very seriously. That's the National Geospatial Advisory Committee.
Okay, very nice. I actually have a question. I want to see if I can get it out there the way I want. Is I know you do team with Esri, and they take your all's data, and a lot of it's been pushed out to the Living Atlas. Okay, and I know a lot of that data that Esri's crunched is put into like a business analyst, for our planners to use and make inferences on. I guess my question is how involved are you all with Esri on the updating of that data or in the accuracy of that data? So, I mean, I guess, and I know you probably can't validate what Esri has done, but are you all involved in that process to QC it? That kind of.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, great question, Brian. No, we provide the data publicly on our website, and Esri goes to our website, downloads the information, and then essentially uploads that to the Living Atlas and to other tools. Once they grab the information from our website, unless they have a technical question or question about the data, we're not involved with that.
Okay. Yeah, that was something I've always was curious, and I think some of our planners have asked me that a number of times, and I was like, since I have you here, I was gonna ask it. So
Thank you.
yeah, no, thank you. Well, let's see here. Are there any other questions? We've got about 10 more minutes here. If you have any questions for Deirdre, it's been a great conversation, a great presentation, and QA experiences here as well. If for some reason you do think of a question after the presentation's over, by all means, send it to us and we'll pass it along to Deirdre. And then, but I guess if there's not any
So
more
it
question, oh, there is.
looks like, yeah, Ellen just came in
Okay.
with another question. Do you ever use geographic information to advise on what things should be asked in the census or how information is categorized?
Ellen, clarify for me a little bit further. So in regard to the type of questions that we ask as part of our decennial census or our current surveys, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm thinking about things like how demographic categories change over time and how we talk about different housing situations. I know you mentioned bringing in information about group housing and things like that, how everything is sort of categorized and grouped and asked over time.
Yeah, great question. In the past, that has not occurred. Typically, the people that make decisions about the type of questions that are asked are the statisticians and the demographers. However, I will say that is really beginning to change, that those groups of people are starting to understand the importance of geospatial information and what happens when you link the geospatial data with the statistical data, right? You're able to see a whole different picture. I will say that with the new administration and the passage of the executive orders related to equity, we are being asked to do a lot more geospatial publication than ever before. And I'll just give you one example. As the country begins to assess the availability and adoption of broadband, internet accessibility, we're being asked to develop a tool that could be shared with the states to help them see, okay, this is where the population would be most likely to adopt broadband if given the opportunity. And so I think in answer to your question, maybe not in the past, but definitely as we move into the future, I see that changing. I
Okay,
hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you. Yeah, it looks like Liz is commented on some of the background of the Esri demographics, and she's provided some links in the chat window in case anybody wants to look that up. Richard has asked you a question, are you available to speak and share this presentation with other GIS professional groups in other states? And before you answer is we also have this posted to our YouTube channel, but by all means, he's asked that question of you, Deirdre.
I'd be happy to, Richard. Most certainly. I met Brian when we were at the GIS Pro conference in Baltimore and spoke to a large crowd there. I've since had a few requests similar to this, and I feel like it's a good opportunity to engage for me with all of you to hear what you as external stakeholders want, and for me to learn, right, more. Appreciate the notes in the chat bar about possible uses of AI, and appreciate your interest in disclosure avoidance. And hopefully I'm able to share some things with you to get you thinking in a different way and understand where we're headed at the Census Bureau.
No, by all means, this has definitely been a fantastic Q&A session. So just to answer your question, Richard, yes, we will post this presentation in Deirdre's slides in a couple of days. We're going to clean it up and make it presentable, get it on our YouTube channel. So, and then it'll be up on our website, which has been revamped. If you haven't been to our website, go check it out. My colleagues have put a lot of work into it, and we're all volunteers here. So there's the link. It's pretty nice. So and we got a new logo. So we've been working hard, and I don't know if we did our own shout out, but we won chapter of the year last year. So it's we're doing a lot of here at Urissa, Texas. So Deidre, Samantha is here, and she says, I'm writing my thesis on the 2020 census, and I would love to interview you and learn some more about you. Would you be willing to send me your contact info, or we can take care of that, Deidre? I plan to use and cite a lot from this presentation. So
I'd be delighted to talk with you, Samantha. Thank you. It would be an honor.
And Samantha is a volunteer here with Urissa, Texas. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Deirdre.
Of course.
So we've got about 4 more minutes here. We can squeeze in a couple of last questions, or if anybody has any other questions, or we can give you 4 minutes back to your day. I think we'll go ahead and let's see here. We're just getting a lot of thank yous and praises and things like that right now. So we appreciate all the help today from all the Urissa, Texas volunteers. And I've got, my co-host Matt Drouillard, who's working on his PhD up in UT. Is it UT Dallas, Matt? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Christina Dietz also is co-host here, and so thanks a lot, Christina. and we just got a lot of people involved here, so it takes a lot to put this on. If you all are interested in volunteering with URSA Texas, go to our website, hit our QR code, and jump in and help us out, because we don't just serve Texas, we serve the United States, and well, we serve globally if we have to. So, Deirdre, do you have any questions for us, or hopefully you had a good experience with us?
I had a great experience with you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I saved the chat over here, and so I can go through and review your comments once again, and I'll try to get back to everyone as appropriate, and look forward to meeting again in the future. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate it. We will see you all next month. You'll be receiving some emails shortly of our next presentation. And but once again, thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. And again, Deidre, we appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all.